On September 8, 2011, the first issue of Tokyo Ghoul was released in Young Jump magazine, starring alongside series such as Terraformers, Gantz, and Kingdom. The series would go on to outsell all of them and become the second best-selling manga premiering in the past decade, second only to Hajime Isayama's Attack on Titan. From this success, Tokyo Ghoul has spawned a sequel series, a live-action movie, multiple video games, and an animated series with its own sequel series. Has there ever been a series that people just won't shut up about? So rather than watching it, you go out of your way to avoid it, only when everything dies down for you to visit the series and realize, oh, that's what I was missing. For me, that was Tokyo Ghoul. As the more I watched, the more I enjoyed myself, eventually switching to the manga and realizing what a grave mistake I'd made, brushing this off as just another series.
The story follows Kaneki, an introverted bookworm studying literature in university who's fallen for Rise Kamishiro. While walking her home, she reveals herself to be a ghoul, a carnivorous humanoid species that can only eat humans, possessing superior strength and a predatory muscle known as Kagane. As Rise is about to eat Kaneki, girders fall, crushing her and injuring him. In order to save him, Dr. Kano transplants Rise's organs into Kaneki, causing him to become a ghoul. Kaneki must then traverse the ghoul world in order to find out who Rise was and if her death was really an accident. It's important to know Kaneki is not a hero. He's weak, frail, and unwilling to fight, and behind his kind exterior are more selfish motivations. To many, Kaneki can be a relatable character, being forced into a world he isn't familiar with and now has to overcome or accept to survive. The ghoul world is very clearly an allegory for the adult world, more specifically from the eyes of a college student, as author Sui Ishida has expressed his distaste for university in the past. And now you can kind of see why Tokyo Ghoul has become popular with a more teenage crowd, and why it can be sometimes perceived as edgy. And that is a fair point. It is intentional. Notice how all the ghouls fighting human society dress in darker colors to match the rebellious phase so many teenagers go through, while those who have accepted their role in society dress in bright colors. But it isn't just Teenage Rebellion, the series. For every loud, edgelord moment, there's another quiet moment of a boy just saying he's sorry. Despite what marketing and the massive amount of fan art might tell you, there are two protagonists in Tokyo Ghoul. The first is Kaneki. The second is first-class CCG officer Kotaro Amon. The CCG, or Commission of Counter Ghouls, is a federal agency designated to protect the public from ghouls. Amon was enrolled in the CCG after finding out his foster father was a ghoul and having his life spared, never knowing why. From that point onwards, determined to find answers, until he runs into Kaneki and has his life spared a second time. From here, Amon is determined to find out why he was spared by a creature which up until that point were only viewed as monsters to him. Amon is the human perspective. He goes to work, deals with paperwork, has trouble with his subordinates, and from every mistake, he learns, developing from a frigid pupil into a skilled teddy bear that you just want to hug. Through Amon, we meet the other investigators, getting to know them quite well, learning about an investigator's everyday life, dealing with cases, reports, and the funerals. In fact, so much depth is put into both sides, you could take one character's perspective, cut it out, and the story would still make a compelling narrative. The narratives work well together as they are following two people looking for the same thing, closure for the events they've endured. The two follow different routes. Amon follows the typical hero's journey, where Kaneki follows the first 13 steps of its sister, the fool's journey. Using both perspectives, Sui Ishida creates a world that is very gray, not in terms of color, but morally.
Tokyo Ghoul is heavily influenced by Parasite, Berserk, the works of One, Hunter x Hunter, and the original Nier, in particular the latter two. Contributing to both, for Hunter x Hunter, Ishida wrote a one-shot of the character Hisoka in his youth. It sits in that gray point between canon and non-canon, as the creator Yoshihiro Togashi has not only approved of the one-shot, but has thought of making parts of it canon. To Nier, producer Yosuke Saito mentioned Natsuki Hane was cast as 9S because he saw him as Kaneki in Tokyo Ghoul. Ishida did the artwork for both Nier and Automata, Zvinals. In turn, Nier has heavily influenced Tokyo Ghoul, not only in several design choices, but particularly the philosophy of people doing terrible things for what they believe is right. From this philosophy, characters aren't really villains, as each of them are doing what they believe is right. And, from their perspective, they are doing the right thing. Take the character of Kureo Mado. He's introduced as a complete monster, someone who is willing to murder a mother defending their child. From this perspective, he's a cartoonishly irredeemable villain. But when we learn more through Amon, we learn that 10 years earlier, he lost his wife to a ghoul, causing him to go on a crusade searching for her killer. But when the ghoul couldn't be found, he put his anger and frustrations out on other ghouls in an attempt to hurt the killer in some way, becoming an obsession. Over the years, his obsession twists him into the monster we see. And despite all of his inhuman acts and unhealthy behaviors, he still stops everything for his daughter, making his death all the more tragic when he dies without ever finding his wife's killer. It's one of those tales that feels straightforward during your first read, but unravels layers of details when you return. For example, in Chapter 2, Kaneki references Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This serves 3 purposes. First, reinforcing the idea that Kaneki likes books. The second is foreshadowing for future events. And third, sets up the allegory for ghouls. In Metamorphosis, a salesman wakes up to find himself to have turned into a bug. Because of this, he is no longer able to work, becoming a burden. At first, his family tries to help him, but in the end, they just hope he leaves them alone until he dies. Several people have theorized if he actually turned into a bug, or if Kafka is making a statement on capitalism. This suits, as in Tokyo Ghoul, ghouls as a whole serve as an allegory for the impoverished, and specific ghouls are allegories for specific themes. Take Tsu Tsukuyama. He is a parallel for a poor person pretending to have wealth. He mimics human behaviors, inserting French words into casual conversation, dressing in nice outfits, and eating off a plate with a knife and fork, something a ghoul does not do. He pretends to be as human as possible, but can never become one. Another example is Rize. Rize is an allegory for addiction, in all forms: gambling, drugs, even sex. In his fight with Amon, Kaneki notices humans can be quite addictive, and as Rize eats at least 11 times the amount of humans required for a ghoul, makes it pretty clear she's addicted to humans. Using her body as a lure to bait her prey, she actively seeks out and surrounds herself in her addictions, leaving corpses around her home to eat whenever she wants. The fact that Rize, a binge eater, is one of the most powerful ghouls in the series, while Banjo, someone who eats only when necessary, is incredibly weak, ties into the consumption parable that as the more ghouls eat, the stronger they become.
It's almost like this is a comment on capitalism.
Let me ask you, do you like foreshadowing? Because in Tokyo Ghoul, it's everywhere. If characters are talking in one scene and the conversation has nothing to do with the plot, you can bet it's foreshadowing. There are several instances that appear to be plot holes, but nope, it's just set up for a much later reveal. To show how heavily plot points are foreshadowed, one of the biggest twists in the series is hidden on page 5 of the first chapter. Fast forward 14 volumes and 136 chapters, and only then is it revealed. Tokyo Ghoul also carries the story of Sui Ishida, the artist and writer of Tokyo Ghoul. Before Tokyo Ghoul, Ishida's pen name was Soto Nami. He wrote 2 webcomics. The first is The Tale of Longing for Sex, a webcomic that is impossible to find now due to a hard drive failure.
The second is The Penis Man. As inappropriate as it sounds, the series is not what you think it is. The series is a comedy following Peony, a superhero who from the neck up has a penis for a head. When he defeats a villain, he, ejaculates on them. Yes, this is real. No, it's not porn. The series starts purely based around gags, such as Peony not being understood by others. To convey this, all Peeny's dialogue resembles scribbles. It's hardly legible. If you can consistently read it, I commend you. As the story moves on, it becomes less based around jokes and more emotional. One chapter involves Anal Beads Man talking another character's problems out. They don't fight, they only talk. Or another chapter has a character lashing out due to reliving a traumatic event. It's clear how Ishida has improved. You can even directly compare where he started to where he is now. To compare, in September of 2016, he redrew the very first chapter of Tokyo Ghoul, and the comparison is immediately noticeable. Not only in art, but how panels flow from and into one another. Exposition is delivered much more naturally, and Kaneki actually has a reason to look at Rise's boobs. That is seemingly unimportant, but in the original, he just looked at her boobs for no reason, whereas in the redrawn version, she leans over the table, exposing her cleavage. Ishida mentioned in the afterword he could never quite get Rise right. She'd always end up looking like a pig. Well, now, I don't think there's any danger of that. There's also several smaller details added, such as Kaneki running to the construction site, and Kaneki talking about his fondness for books while walking Rise home. We also get a much better idea of how Kaneki asked Rise out. The series owes a lot of its popularity to its adaptation. That doesn't make it a good adaptation automatically. Despite that, I will say this. The first 9 episodes are better than the manga. In the manga, there are numerous redundant scenes and breaking of several rules, such as when transitioning from one scene to another, the following scene has to start on the next page. The exception to this being flashbacks, as well as several character inconsistencies that just don't make sense for the character of Yoshimura in particular. It comes off as a little hypocritical when Yoshimura tells Kaneki he can be a bridge between the ghouls and humans, when before he really just gave him food and sent him on his way. Especially when he easily figures out who Kaneki was on his own. Yes, the manga makes Kaneki an active protagonist, figuring out that ghouls can drink coffee on his own. But having Yoshimura and the Enteiku staff help Kaneki makes more sense, as well as having a transition from a passive protagonist to an active one adds another level to his development. The anime also makes more sense structurally. Having a ghoul as the antagonist before those who hunt ghouls for a living builds them up for their confrontation. The series boasts one fantastic opening, one above-average opening, 2 okay ending songs, and all the endings artwork done by Sui Ishida. The animation and background art, when it isn't cutting corners, look absolutely beautiful. The use of long shadows always carries a sense of foreboding, like anything could jump out from the shadows at any moment. When it isn't taking a panel and turning it into an individual frame, the fight choreography surpasses the source material. Take the battle between the rabbit and Mado. In the manga, the fight stays in the street until the rabbit retreats. However, in the anime, the fight takes full advantage of its location and has the fight move up to the telephone lines, then back down, showcasing what the rabbit and Mado's new Quinque can do. The majority of the series episodes were directed and storyboarded by Shin Matsuo and Tadahito Matsubayashi. However, the series as a whole was directed by Shuhei Morita, who had only worked on a handful of projects beforehand. Despite this, his short, Possession, earned a great deal of praise, so much that he actually was nominated for an Oscar. Still, I recommend you consider switching to the manga by episode 10. Episodes 10 through 12 are still enjoyable, they are just missing too much information for me to recommend it to you. So, to close the gap, the most important chapter the anime skips over is chapter 53, which explains the power system of ghouls and how they are rated. To put it simply, Kagune come in 4 different variations: Ukaku, Kokaku, Rinkaku, and Bikaku, each determined by where the Kakuho, the organ that holds the Kagune, is located on the back. Each has their own strength and each their own weakness.
The highest Kagane is the Ukaku, extending from the shoulder blades, possessing a great deal of speed and can attack from long range. They work great in short bursts, but lose stamina quickly, making the ghoul more vulnerable the longer the battle ensues. Beneath it is the Kokaku, located below the shoulder blade. They are extremely powerful in both offense and defensive capabilities, but are slowed down by their weight. The Rikaku, located next to the waist, can sprout scaled tentacles, regenerate quickly, and manipulate the shape of their Kagane as a whole. But they are at a disadvantage when they are on the defense, as they break easily and can be completely disarmed by a Bikaku. Bikaku are located around the coccyx, and are the most balanced in terms of offense, defense, and speed. It isn't bad against any other Kagane, but can easily be overwhelmed against an Ukaku. If you haven't noticed, there is a rock, paper, scissors power system, as each Kagane is weak against the one above it. Ghouls also have ratings from C to triple S. It isn't an exact measure of power, but how to combat them. A C-rank ghoul can be taken down by any low-rank officer, whereas a triple S rank requires multiple special class investigators. The ratings and Kagane mean they have a disadvantage. It's not a guaranteed win or loss. Cunning strategy, reflexes, and teamwork will prevail over any opponent, no matter their rating. The best example of this is the CCG officers, as every ghoul has a physical advantage over humans. And despite this, humans are well able to hold their own. The problems start with Route A. In September of 2014, Tokyo Ghoul's Chinese site leaked the announcement of a second season called Route A. The fact that it was the Chinese site is ironic because Tokyo Ghoul is currently banned in China as of April of 2015. Tokyo Ghoul's first season and Route A were made by Studio Pierrot, a studio known for padding out absolutely everything. Ironically, the problem is it's too short. The series had too much that needed adapting for just 12 episodes. At minimum, it needed to be 16 episodes. Plot points couldn't have been altered to fit the adaptation, because everything was bound together by causality. In 2011, the creators of South Park, Matt Stone and Trey Parker, did a lecture explaining how to make a good narrative. The rule brought forth was plot points have to be linked by a therefore or but then, cause and effect. If any plot points are linked by a and then, you have a problem. Route A's reason why I could not make a good adaptation is from Volume 8 onwards, the story is bound by therefore, only switching to but then when Aogiri is involved. Route A instead replaces several of these plot points with and then. Because of this, entire episodes are completely pointless. Instead of having the story brought to its logical conclusion, events just happen without any reason. Kaneki breaks free of Aogiri, and then decides to join them, and then they decide to break into the CCG detention facility, and then the CCG gets a tip about the ghouls in Anteku. None of these events are connected directly by any logical reason. They just happen for no reason whatsoever. Because Kaneki joins Aogiri in Route A, the series wants to give him an aura of mystery. To accomplish this, he is completely removed from the narrative, only popping up every now and then. Remember when I said you could cut out half the story and the other half would still make a compelling narrative? The issue with removing Kaneki is you're removing one of your protagonists and not replacing him with anything. As such, Amon has to carry the plot for both sides of the story, which, even if it were possible, would negate the entire point of having a dual narrative. With the first season of Tokyo Ghoul, most of the changes made sense and improved the narrative. Route A actively hurts itself when it tries to stay to the original, actively making several scenes worse by trying. Bringing up several plot points that go nowhere, like whatever happened to Banjo? We only see him once, and then we never see him again. Or outright showing the viewer a character's identity and then pretending like it's some kind of mystery. It's not. You showed us this character. We know who it is. It's a real shame, as at this point, the series becomes less an amalgamation of previous works that it takes inspirations from, and instead develops an identity of its own. Here's how I recommend you ingest Tokyo Ghoul. Watch the first 9 episodes, then switch to Volume 6. Or, if you aren't impressed by that point, watch until episode 12, and then switch to Volume 8. Viz Media has recently released all of Tokyo Ghoul, and in midst of a few hiccups, Viz's release is worth reading. And recently, Viz has started to release the volumes of the sequel series Tokyo Ghoul Re. I should, however, notify you that on the second page of every volume are character profiles. And while these can be neat and interesting, they oftentimes spoil plot points for the volume you're about to read. All that I ask is that you give it a chance. It isn't exactly very light at times, but what's there is something special.